My boyfriend Trey sent me a breakup text at 3 a.m. on a Wednesday, after 2 years together. The message said he needed space to find himself and we wanted different things. We had been planning to move in together after my lease ended in August. We had already started looking at apartments and discussing furniture. 2 weeks before the text, I had bought him a Tissot watch for our 2-year anniversary. He wore it every single day and constantly posted photos of it. The day after the text, I called him twice just to mess with this clown. Both calls went straight to voicemail, which was hilarious. I sent 3 texts asking if we could talk. I checked his social media. He had unfriended me on Facebook and made his Instagram private. Classic move from someone who thinks he's such a genius. Thursday morning, my coworker Yasmin showed me something on her phone during our coffee break. Look where Trey is right now. She held up Instagram stories from him, clearly thinking this was exciting news to share with his girlfriend. The location tag read Barcelona, Spain. The first story showed a hotel room with 2 separate beds and expensive bedding. The second showed breakfast with 2 coffee cups and pastries. The third showed Trey wearing my anniversary watch, smiling directly at whoever was taking the photo. I recognized the hotel immediately. We had bookmarked it 6 months earlier when planning a trip we never took. The same trip we had researched together for weeks, comparing flight prices and reading reviews. The trip that cost $3,000 per person according to our detailed budget spreadsheet. Yasmin scrolled to the next story, still excited to show me what she thought was cool vacation content. A girl with blonde hair and a nose ring was tagged. Gemma. I knew her. She worked in Trey's office as a social media coordinator. She was 22. I had met her at his company holiday party in December. The final story showed both of them at Park Güell taking selfies together. Gemma was wearing a sundress I had saved in my online shopping cart, but never bought because I thought it was too expensive at $180. Trey had his arm around her waist in the exact same pose we used to do for photos. Yasmin was looking at me expectantly, probably waiting for me to get excited about Trey's vacation or ask who the girl was. I just said thanks for showing me and walked back to my desk. I screenshot everything before the 24-hour stories expired and sent them to my friend Liana. Look at this absolute clown, I texted her. Trey had blocked me on Instagram but deliberately left his stories public for everyone else to see. This dumbass thought he was being so smart, but he had no idea how pathetic he looked. Friday afternoon, I received a Venmo request from Trey. The amount was $47. The description read, "Gas money, thanks." I burst out laughing. He had blocked me on every platform except Venmo, the app where money changes hands. This absolute moron actually thought I would pay him while he was in Spain with another woman. I called Liana immediately. "You're not going to believe this. This clown just asked me for gas money while he's in Barcelona." Liana couldn't stop laughing either. We both knew he was about to get a reality check. I couldn't stop refreshing their Instagram stories because this train wreck was too entertaining to miss. Every new post was more ridiculous than the last. They thought they were living their best life in Barcelona while he had the balls to ask me for money. Saturday evening, they posted photos from a rooftop restaurant in Barcelona that I recognized from our shared Pinterest board. Gemma wore the watch Trey usually wore on his right wrist. My watch. The one I had saved for 3 months to afford by bringing lunch to work every day. She had it wrapped around her wrist like a bracelet because it was too large for her tiny frame. I couldn't stop laughing at how ridiculous she looked wearing a men's watch that clearly didn't fit her. Sunday night, they returned to Chicago on a late flight. Trey posted a photo of himself at O'Hare Airport with the caption, "Back to reality." He was no longer wearing my watch anywhere in the photo. Probably gave it to his little girlfriend as some grand romantic gesture. How original. Monday morning, I was still checking Gemma's Instagram highlights because her profile was completely public. Among her stories about the Barcelona trip was something that made me stop dead in my tracks. She had posted a screenshot of her Venmo payment with some text about finally sending money for our dream trip. The screenshot showed $1847 sent to Trey with the description, "Barcelona Fund." The timestamp read, Tuesday 11:23 p.m., 4 hours before he sent me the breakup text. I screenshot that transaction and sent it to Liana with crying laughing emojis. This absolute genius had left a paper trail of his entire scheme. Thursday morning, exactly 1 week after the breakup text, I received another Venmo request, this time for $23. The description read, "Coffee run, you know you want to." The emoji he included was the same one he used to send me when we were together. I looked at his smiling profile photo where he was still wearing my watch and started cracking up. This man actually thought he could treat me like his personal ATM after what he did. But here's what this clown didn't realize. I knew exactly how to make him come crawling back. And when this dumbass did, he was going to regret ever messing with me. First update. So exactly 1 week after Mr. I Need Space sent that pathetic breakup text, I decided enough was enough. This man thought he could just ignore my calls and texts while begging for gas money? Time for a reality check. I called his office directly and asked to speak with Trey about a personal matter regarding shared expenses. The receptionist put me through immediately. When he picked up, I could hear him scrambling to get somewhere private. He started with this nervous laugh and said he couldn't talk because he was in meetings all day. I told him that was interesting since he seemed to have plenty of time for Instagram stories and Venmo requests. The silence was golden. Then he got defensive and said we needed to be mature about this breakup and that meant giving each other space to process. I asked him point blank about Gemma and the Barcelona trip. He actually had the balls to tell me I was imagining things and that Gemma was just a work friend who happened to be on vacation at the same time. When I mentioned the 1,847,000 transaction, he went completely silent for like 30 seconds. Then he claimed that was just him paying her back for covering his share of team lunch expenses over several months. I started laughing so hard I couldn't breathe. Team lunch expenses for $1,800? This man really thought I was born yesterday. He kept insisting that I was making connections that weren't there and that my behavior was becoming concerning. When I asked about my watch, he said he forgot he was wearing it and would return it soon. The way he said, forgot, like a $400 Tissot watch, just slips your mind. I told him I wanted it back by Friday and that we needed to meet in person to discuss our shared belongings. He agreed, but only if we met somewhere public. Wednesday afternoon, my sister Vivian called me completely losing her mind. Apparently our mutual friend Edgar had seen Trey's Instagram stories and told his girlfriend, who told Vivian's roommate, who finally told Vivian. Small world, right? But here's where it gets interesting. Edgar mentioned that at some work happy hour in January, Trey had been complaining about how expensive I was and how I always wanted to do costly activities. This was news to me since I was the one paying for most of our dates and bringing lunch to work to save money for his anniversary present. Vivian was absolutely livid and wanted to drive to his apartment immediately to confront him. I had to physically stop her from showing up at his place because honestly, watching this man dig his own grave was way more entertaining than having my sister tear him apart. She kept saying she never liked him anyway, and that she always thought he was using me. Classic sister response. But she wasn't wrong. Thursday morning, I get a text from Trey saying he wanted to push our meeting to Saturday because work was crazy. The audacity of this man to think he could control the timeline after what he did. I told him Friday at 6 p.m. at that coffee shop near his office, or I'd be happy to discuss everything publicly at his workplace instead. Suddenly, his schedule opened up. But wait, it gets better. Thursday afternoon, I'm at Target buying basic necessities when I run into Gemma in the makeup aisle. This girl sees me, freezes like a deer in headlights, and then actually tries to hide behind a display of foundation. I walked right up to her and said we should probably talk since we apparently have so much in common now. She immediately started apologizing and saying she had no idea Trey had a serious girlfriend until after they got back from Barcelona. I asked her how that was possible since she met me at the company holiday party in December. She claimed she thought I was just some random date and that Trey told her we had broken up months ago. When I showed her the screenshot of her Venmo payment to him timestamped 4 hours before he broke up with me, her face went completely white. She started rambling about how Trey had been talking about this trip for weeks and how he said he needed a vacation after ending a toxic relationship. Toxic relationship. This man told his little side piece that I was toxic while wearing the watch I bought him and using her money to fund his getaway. Gemma kept saying she would never have gone if she knew the truth and that she felt terrible about everything. I told her she could keep feeling terrible because I honestly didn't care about her guilt. What I cared about was the fact that she was clearly being played just as much as I was. When I asked if she knew where my watch was, she got even more uncomfortable. Apparently, Trey told her it was a gift from his grandmother and that it had sentimental value. This lying piece of trash gave my anniversary present to another woman and made up some sob story about dead relatives. The conversation lasted maybe 10 minutes, but I got more information from her than I'd gotten from Trey in a week. She mentioned that he'd been planning to ask his boss for a promotion and that he thought dating someone from the office would help his image. She also said he'd been looking at expensive apartments way outside his budget and complaining about needing to find ways to make more money. When I got back to work Friday, I finally told Yasmin what had actually happened. She was shocked and kept saying she had no idea when she showed me those Barcelona stories that they were cheating photos. She felt terrible for being so excited about showing me Trey's vacation when he was actually there with another woman. I told her it wasn't her fault. She had no way of knowing he just dumped me via text. When I got home, I called Vivian and told her everything. She immediately started connecting dots that I hadn't even considered. Trey had been asking me about my savings account balance and my promotion timeline at work. He'd been really interested in my family's financial situation and whether my parents would help with a down payment on a house. Vivian reminded me that just last month he'd suggested I should look into higher paying jobs and maybe ask for a raise. Everything started making sense in the worst possible way. This man hadn't just decided he needed space to find himself. He'd been actively planning his exit strategy while figuring out how to upgrade his entire life situation. The Barcelona trip wasn't some spontaneous romantic getaway. It was a calculated test run with someone who could potentially advance his career and fund his lifestyle in ways I apparently couldn't. Friday finally arrives and I'm sitting in that coffee shop watching Trey walk in 15 minutes late, looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. He sits down and immediately launches into this prepared speech about how we want different things and how he thinks we'd both be happier with other people. I let him finish his entire monologue before I pulled out my phone and showed him every screenshot I'd taken. The Barcelona trip photos, Gemma's Venmo payment, his Instagram stories, the works. He started claiming that I was stalking him and violating his privacy by screenshotting his public social media posts. When I brought up my conversation with Gemma, he completely lost it and said she had no right to discuss their private business with me. Then came the real kicker. I asked him point blank if he'd been planning this for weeks. He actually tried to gaslight me by saying I was being paranoid and creating conspiracy theories. When I mentioned what Gemma told me about him claiming we'd broken up months ago, he said she must have misunderstood because she's young and dramatic. This man really blamed a 22-year-old for his own lies. I told him I wanted my watch back immediately and he claimed he'd left it at home. Such a convenient excuse. When I said I'd wait while he went to get it, he said he couldn't because he was having dinner with his parents and they were expecting him. I asked if his parents knew about his Barcelona vacation and his new girlfriend. The silence told me everything I needed to know. We argued for another 20 minutes and got absolutely nowhere. He kept deflecting and making excuses while I kept presenting facts. Finally, I told him he had until Sunday to return my watch and figure out how he was going to handle this situation like an adult. As I was leaving, he actually had the nerve to ask if I was going to pay that Venmo request for the coffee money. That night, I'm venting to Vivian about the whole disaster when she drops something on me that changes everything. Apparently, her friend Justin works in HR at a company that does business with Trey's firm. Vivian mentioned our situation to Justin, who said there have been rumors about inappropriate office relationships at Trey's company recently. Nothing confirmed, but enough workplace gossip that HR has been paying attention. Suddenly, I realized that Trey isn't just some dumbass who thought he could play two women at once. He's potentially risking his entire career for this little office romance. And if there's one thing I've learned about men like Trey, it's that they get really desperate really fast when their professional reputation is on the line. Sunday comes and goes with no word from him about my watch. Monday morning, I wake up to 3 missed calls and 2 voicemails from numbers I don't recognize. The first voicemail is Trey using what sounds like his friend's phone, asking me to please call him back because we need to discuss something important. The second voicemail is from a different number, also clearly Trey, saying he has my watch and wants to return it but needs to explain something first. The desperation in his voice tells me everything I need to know. Whatever game this man thought he was playing, he's finally starting to realize that he's not the only one who knows how to play it. Reddit, I have a feeling this clown is about to find out exactly what happens when you underestimate the wrong woman. Stay tuned because Wednesday's conversation is going to be very interesting. Second update, I cannot even begin to describe what went down yesterday. You guys told me to prepare for the worst and I thought I was ready, but this absolute train wreck of a human being managed to surprise even me. Grab your popcorn because this is going to be long. So Wednesday finally arrives and I'm sitting in my car outside that same coffee shop, watching Trey pace back and forth on the sidewalk for 10 minutes before I even got out. When I walked up, he immediately started with this whole spiel about how grateful he was that I agreed to meet and how he'd been thinking about everything I said. I cut him off and told him I didn't come here for his gratitude speech. I came for my watch and an explanation for why he thought sending me Venmo requests while gallivanting around Europe was acceptable behavior. He pulled out this small jewelry box from his jacket pocket and set it on the table between us. The audacity of this man to present my own property like it was some generous gift he was bestowing upon me. He started explaining that the whole Barcelona situation was complicated and that I didn't understand the full context. According to Trey, Gemma had been planning this vacation for months and invited him as a friend when her original travel companion canceled. He claimed he only agreed to go because he thought we were having problems and he needed perspective on our relationship. When I asked why he didn't mention any of this before breaking up with me, he said he didn't want to hurt my feelings by telling me he was having doubts. He insisted that nothing romantic happened between them until after we officially broke up, which technically was true since he waited a whole 4 hours between taking her money and sending me that text. When I brought up the watch situation, he got defensive and said Gemma had admired it during their trip, and he let her wear it temporarily because she forgot to bring jewelry. He claimed he never intended for her to keep it and that he got it back as soon as he realized I was upset about it. I asked him point blank why he told Gemma that we'd broken up months ago and that I was his toxic ex. His face went completely red and he started stuttering about how Gemma must have misunderstood something he said. He tried to convince me that he would never talk badly about me to anyone, especially not someone from his workplace. When I mentioned that I had direct quotes from Gemma about their conversations, he started getting agitated and said she was probably trying to cause drama between us. Every time I presented facts, he had some elaborate explanation that technically wasn't impossible, but was obviously complete bullshit. He kept insisting that he cared about me and never meant for things to happen this way. When I asked why he was requesting money from me if he cared so much, he actually said the Venmo requests were his way of maintaining contact because he missed talking to me. That's when something clicked in my brain, and I started thinking about all the times over the past 6 months that Trey had asked me for money. The $800 for emergency car repairs that couldn't wait until his next paycheck. The $450 for his portion of his friend's bachelor party because his salary was delayed due to payroll issues. The $320 for urgent dental work that his insurance wouldn't cover until the new policy year started. The $600 for helping his parents with their mortgage payment when his dad was between jobs. Every single time, he'd had some perfectly reasonable explanation for why he needed cash immediately and couldn't wait for his own income. Every single time, I'd believed him and transferred money without question, because that's what you do for someone you love and trust. I had never once asked for proof of these expenses or questioned why his financial emergencies always seemed to coincide with my paydays. I asked him directly how much money I'd given him over the past year and watched him get uncomfortable for the first time during our conversation. He started claiming that those were loans and that he'd always planned to pay me back once his financial situation stabilized. When I pointed out that he'd never once mentioned repayment timelines or even acknowledged the amounts as debts, he said he assumed I understood that he would take care of it eventually. But here's where it gets really fucking interesting. During my conversation with Gemma at Target, she'd mentioned that Trey had been incredibly generous during their Barcelona trip and had insisted on paying for everything, despite her offering to split costs. She'd also mentioned that he bought her parents expensive gifts when they visited her family the weekend before the trip, including a $400 bottle of wine for her father and a designer handbag for her mother. I started doing math in my head and realized that over the past 6 months, I'd given Trey close to $3,000 for various emergencies and expenses. Money that he'd never paid back or even mentioned again after receiving. Money that he'd apparently been using to fund his lifestyle and impress other people while telling me he was financially struggling. When I brought this up, he immediately became defensive and started claiming that I was trying to make normal relationship support sound sinister. He said that couples help each other financially, and that it was petty to keep track of every dollar. He insisted that he would have done the same for me if our situations were reversed, and that my focus on money was making him uncomfortable. I told him that what made me uncomfortable was realizing that he'd been lying about financial emergencies to extract money from me while simultaneously funding romantic gestures for another woman. He tried to argue that the timeline didn't overlap, but I reminded him that Gemma's parents received their expensive gifts the same week he'd asked me for dental work money. He started accusing me of being vindictive and trying to ruin his life over what he called misunderstandings about money. I pointed out that there was nothing misunderstood about him requesting cash for fake emergencies while planning a romantic getaway funded by his coworker. He claimed I was focusing on details instead of seeing the bigger picture, which was that our relationship had problems and we both needed space to figure things out. When I asked what problems he was referring to since he'd never mentioned any to me before that night, he started listing complaints I'd never heard before. Apparently I was too controlling because I liked making plans in advance. I was too expensive because I enjoyed going to nice restaurants occasionally. I was too serious about the relationship because I talked about our future together. Every single thing he was complaining about were things he'd actively participated in and encouraged when we were together. But the really rich part was him calling me expensive when I'd been subsidizing his lifestyle for months without realizing it. This man who'd been crying poverty and asking for emergency loans was now claiming that I was financially demanding. The cognitive dissonance was absolutely stunning. He tried to rewrite our entire relationship history to justify his behavior. According to Trey, he'd been feeling trapped for months but didn't know how to bring it up because I wouldn't have listened. When I asked for specific examples of times I refused to listen to his concerns, he couldn't give me any. He just kept saying I should have known he was unhappy, and that healthy relationships shouldn't require constant communication about problems. When I pointed out that healthy relationships also shouldn't require one partner to lie about financial emergencies to extract money from the other, he got angry and said I was being manipulative by bringing up financial support that he'd never actually asked for, except I had screenshots of every single Venmo transaction and text message conversation where he'd explained his various urgent needs for cash. After 2 hours of this circular nonsense, I was completely done. I took my watch, told him I never wanted to see him again, and started walking toward my car. That's when he actually grabbed my arm and said we weren't finished talking. I turned around and told him that if he ever touched me again without permission, our next conversation would be happening in front of a police officer. He immediately backed off and started apologizing, claiming he was just frustrated and didn't mean anything by it. When I got home, I called my parents because I needed to talk to someone who'd known me longer than Trey had. My mom answered and could immediately tell something was wrong. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, and then asked me one question. She wanted to know if I truly believed this behavior came out of nowhere, or if there had been signs I'd ignored because I wanted the relationship to work. That question hit me like a freight train because honestly, there had been signs. So many signs that I'd rationalized or dismissed because I thought they weren't worth fighting about. My dad got on the phone and asked what I planned to do next. I told him I honestly didn't know because part of me wanted to expose everything publicly and part of me just wanted to move on and forget this ever happened. He reminded me that moving on didn't mean accepting unacceptable behavior, and that sometimes the best way to get closure was to make sure the other person faced real consequences for their actions. That night, I couldn't sleep because I kept thinking about something else Gemma had mentioned during our Target conversation. She'd said that Trey had been talking about his financial goals and how he was working on improving his savings rate by cutting unnecessary expenses. The same man who'd been asking me for emergency money was apparently bragging to his new girlfriend about his fiscal responsibility. Thursday morning, I woke up to 5 text messages from Trey sent between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. The first one was another apology for grabbing my arm and insisting that he'd never hurt me intentionally. The second was a long explanation about how stressed he'd been lately with work pressure and family expectations. The third was him claiming that he still had feelings for me and regretted how everything had played out. The fourth message was where things got really interesting. He admitted that the Barcelona trip had been a mistake and that he'd been trying to convince himself he had feelings for Gemma when really he was just scared of commitment with me. He said seeing how upset I was made him realize that he'd been running away from something good instead of working through his issues like an adult. The fifth message was him asking if we could try couples counseling or take a break to work on ourselves individually before deciding whether our relationship was really over. This man who'd sent me a breakup text at 3 a.m. and immediately fled the country with another woman was now suggesting we work on our relationship. I showed the messages to Vivian, who pointed out that every single one of them was focused on what Trey wanted and how Trey felt without any acknowledgement of how his actions had affected me. Even his apologies were really just excuses wrapped in sorry-sounding language. She asked if I noticed that he hadn't actually taken responsibility for any of his choices. Everything was either a mistake, a misunderstanding, or the result of external pressure. Friday afternoon, I get a call from my mom asking if I'd heard from Trey's parents recently. Apparently his mother had called mine asking if there was anything they should know about why Trey seemed so upset lately. His mom mentioned that he'd been acting strange since his vacation and that she was worried about him. My mother, being the diplomatic saint that she is, simply said that Trey and I had broken up and that it might be best for his parents to talk to him directly about what was happening in his life. Trey's mom also mentioned that they'd been expecting to meet Gemma soon because Trey had told them he was dating someone new from work who might be joining them for Sunday dinner this weekend. This man had been introducing his rebound relationship to his family while simultaneously texting me about couples counseling and working on our relationship. I realized that Trey wasn't just manipulating me. He was playing multiple angles at once and lying to everyone in his life to maintain whatever narrative served his purposes in the moment. His parents thought he was happily moving on with someone new. Gemma probably thought they were building something serious together. I was supposed to believe he was confused and wanted to reconcile. And his workplace was apparently investigating whether his relationship with Gemma violated company policies. But the piece that really made everything click was remembering that Gemma had mentioned Trey talking about asking his parents for financial help with a security deposit on a new apartment. The same parents who probably had no idea their son had been extracting thousands of dollars from his girlfriend for fake emergencies while planning to leave her for someone who could advance his career. The man had built a house of cards and was frantically trying to keep all the pieces from falling down. But what he didn't realize was that I was done being a playing piece in his game. Sunday dinner with his parents was going to be very interesting, especially since I was pretty sure no one in that room would have accurate information about what kind of person Trey really was. Reddit, I think it's time for this clown to learn what happens when you try to play chess with someone who's been funding your lifestyle while you practice your moves on someone else. Part 4 is going to be epic. Final update, Reddit. I'm typing this with the biggest smile on my face because this man get exactly what he deserved. You've all been waiting for this conclusion, and trust me, it delivered in ways I couldn't have planned if I tried. Buckle up, because this is going to be the most satisfying revenge story you'll read this year. So Saturday night, I'm sitting at home trying to decide if I should just block this clown and move on or actually do something about all his lies. That's when Vivian calls me with some tea from her friend Justin, who works in HR at a company that does business with Trey's firm. Apparently, there's been a formal complaint about an employee violating workplace policies with relationships and expense reports. Someone at Trey's job has been tracking his Barcelona trip and his whole thing with Gemma. This explained why Trey was so panicked during our coffee meeting. He wasn't just worried about gossip, he was potentially getting fired. All his begging about not making things worse for him suddenly made sense. Sunday afternoon, I decided enough was enough. I drove to Trey's parents' house knowing Gemma would be there for their big family dinner introduction. I didn't have some master plan, I just wanted everyone to finally know the truth about what their precious son had been doing. His mom answered the door and seemed happy to see me. She brought me into the living room where Trey was sitting with Gemma looking all coupley, while his dad asked her about her job. The look on Trey's face when he saw me was priceless. Pure terror mixed with rage that I actually showed up. His parents were acting like everything was normal and talking about how nice it was that we could all be friends after the breakup. That's when I realized Trey never told them we just broke up 2 weeks ago. They thought our relationship ended months ago, which is why they were cool with him bringing someone new around. I sat down and told his parents there might be some confusion about when things actually happened. I explained that Trey sent me a breakup text 2 weeks ago at 3 a.m. and immediately went to Barcelona with Gemma. Trey started interrupting and saying I was confused about dates, but I pulled out my phone with all the screenshots. The breakup text, his Instagram stories from Barcelona wearing my watch, everything. Gemma's face went white looking at the evidence. She finally understood that Trey had lied about literally everything regarding our relationship timeline. I told his parents about all the fake emergencies Trey had been using to get money from me. The $800 for car repairs, the $450 for bachelor party costs, the $320 for dental work, the $600 to help with their mortgage when his dad was supposedly between jobs. His dad's face went completely red and he stood up from his chair. What the hell are you talking about? I was never between jobs. We never needed help with our mortgage. His voice was getting louder with each word, and Trey started shrinking into the couch. His mom asked what dental problems because Trey never mentioned any dental issues to them. When I showed them the text where he asked me for dental money, she started shaking her head and saying, "This can't be real." Gemma mentioned that Trey bought expensive gifts for her parents the week before Barcelona. Wine for her dad that cost $400 and a designer bag for her mom. When his mom asked where he got money for expensive gifts when last month he was crying to them about needing $200 for an apartment deposit because he was completely broke, she started raising her voice asking, "How could you lie to us like this?" His dad was pacing around the room getting more angry by the minute. "So you've been taking money from everyone? From us? From her? While spending it on some girl from your office?" Trey tried to interrupt, but his dad cut him off. "Don't you dare speak right now. We raised you better than this." His parents are old school strict, and I could see where this was going. His mom was crying now, asking how her son could look her in the eye and lie about needing money while he was buying gifts for another woman's family. What kind of person did we raise? She kept saying over and over. Trey started panicking and claiming everything was just misunderstandings and bad timing. His dad exploded. "Misunderstandings? You stole money from people who love you. That's not a misunderstanding, that's theft." Gemma was sitting there in shock, asking question after question. She was putting together that every story he told was different. His mom was getting more upset with each answer. "Why did you need money for things that never happened? Why didn't you tell us you could afford expensive trips? She was so disappointed. Instead of apologizing, this absolute idiot started attacking me for showing up and ruining his dinner. He said I was obsessed and couldn't handle that we were over. His dad lost it completely. You think she's the problem here? She's the only one telling the truth. His voice was so loud I thought the neighbors might call the cops. You lied to everyone in this room and you're blaming her? His mom stood up and started yelling too. I don't even know who you are anymore. The son I raised wouldn't steal from his family. The son I raised wouldn't lie about emergencies for money. Trey tried to say it wasn't stealing because he planned to pay everyone back eventually. His dad was furious. When? When were you planning to pay us back? You've been lying for months. Gemma asked him directly how much money he took from other people to pay for their relationship. Trey said it was complicated and emotions don't follow money rules. His mom screamed, "Stop making excuses." His parents kept asking more questions and getting angrier with each pathetic answer. His dad wanted to know exactly how much money he owed and Trey couldn't give a straight answer. His mom was crying, asking if he ever planned to tell them the truth or just keep lying forever. The screaming went on for almost an hour. His dad was yelling about how they didn't raise a thief. His mom was crying, asking where they went wrong. Gemma was asking if anything he told her was true. And Trey was just sitting there getting smaller and smaller as everyone realized what he really was. His mom finally told him he needed to get out of their house and not come back until he could look them in the eye and tell them the complete truth about everything he'd done. His dad said they were done giving him money for anything until he paid back every single person he'd lied to. Gemma said she couldn't even look at him anymore and left without saying goodbye. His parents told him to get his things and leave because they were too disgusted to have him in their house. Trey followed me outside trying to convince me that I'd ruined his life over money misunderstandings. I told him his parents were right. He was a thief who got caught and now everyone knew what he really was. Monday morning, Gemma texted thanking me and saying she was trying to figure out if she sent money that belonged to other people. She felt sick knowing their whole relationship was built on stolen money. Tuesday, Yasmin told me Trey got put on leave from work pending investigation. Policy violations plus expense report problems were serious enough for immediate action. Wednesday, my mom called saying Trey's mother had been going through bank records all day. They calculated over $5,500 in loans and gifts he never paid back. Combined with almost $3,000 he stole from me, this man took close to $8,500 from people who trusted him. His parents are talking to a lawyer about getting their money back. They're so angry they want to make sure he faces real consequences for what he did. The desperate texts stopped. The manipulation stopped. My phone has been silent and it feels amazing. Trey wanted to find himself? Congratulations, buddy. You found out what happens when you steal from your family while thinking you're smart enough to get away with it. Hope that Barcelona trip was worth losing everyone who ever cared about you. Update. He moved back to his parents' house because he can't afford rent without a job. They're making him pay them rent and get a part-time job to start paying everyone back. His mom told mine that they're monitoring every dollar he spends until he proves he can be trusted again. The man who thought he was so clever is now 27 years old, living under his parents' rules while working retail to pay back the money he stole. His dad makes him show receipts for everything he buys.